Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure, is sponsored by SJ&L General Contractors. They are licensed in both Alabama and Tennessee, and they provide services such as mass grading, storm drainage, sewer and concrete improvement, asphalt paving, erosion control, demolition, and heavy hauling. If you need any of these services, contact them 931-433-4660, 931-433-4660. Also, they are in need of heavy equipment operators, concrete finishers, CDL dump truck drivers, and pipe layers. If you're interested in employment with this family-owned business, you can go to the website www.sjnl.com. That's www.sjnl.com. I was standing in the foyer of the Savannah Church of Christ, which is in Savannah, Tennessee. I had gotten up early on a Sunday morning to drive over there to speak. The church, the congregation in Savannah, host an event called Evangelism University. It's one of the largest evangelism training conferences for young people. And I've been privileged to be their guest several times. This was just a normal Sunday morning. I was going to do 3 presentations on marriage and family. And I'd gotten up early that morning and driven to Savannah. While I was standing in the foyer about to go in the building, my phone wiggled in my pocket. I pulled it out, and it was my lovely wife. And I answered the phone as quietly as I could, and she said, "The pigs are standing in water." I'm not sure what you expect when your wife calls you. I speak Jackinese, so I understood what she was talking about. There's a little creek not a mile from our house. It's called Hurricane Creek. It runs in a serpentine pattern and borders a little sod farm. And the sod farm and where we live is higher than the pasture on the other side. And oftentimes when there's too much rain, the little creek can't control it all, and it floods that entire pasture. Somewhere in the exchange of properties, there's just an acre of land. I think Gene Nelson owned it for a while, and I've actually hunted on his property up in Paint Rock. But he had this one random acre that this young man bought, and he goes in and he installs T-posts and he puts in hog wire, and inside his little enclosure, he's got a herd of pigs. And the pigs live out there, and they've got holes that they've scratched out, and he's backhoed a little thing that they have a mud puddle and they lie in. So when my wife calls and said the pigs are standing in water, that's what pigs do, baby. They stand in water, they sleep in water, they play in water. You ever heard the phrase, "Don't wrestle a pig in the mud"? Number 1, the pig will beat you. Number 2, the pig enjoys it. But she calls me on this Sunday morning. I'm trying to walk into a church building and preach, and she says the pigs are standing in water. This little pig went to market. This little pig stayed home. This little pig doesn't belong to you. These are not our pigs. But ever since the pigs first showed up in the pasture, her theme has been, hey, what are those pigs going to do if the creek gets out? I'm worried about those pigs. Baby, they're not our pigs. The man who put the pigs there, and he doesn't live here. He doesn't know that creek gets out. What are those pigs going to do if the creek gets out? And on this Sunday morning, the creek was getting out, and she had called me to say that the pigs were standing on a pile of dirt, and their feet were already wet. And she was almost in tears. I remembered seeing a sign on the fence that mentioned XYZ Farms. I Googled that name and came up with a phone number in Gurley, Alabama, and I called on a Sunday morning, and a very polite young man answered the phone, and I said, "I hate to bother you with this, but my wife has adopted your pigs. She's seen your pigs in the little pasture over there by Hurricane Creek, and she is worried herself sick about what's going to happen if the creek floods. And the creek is flooding this morning, and the pigs are standing out there in the water, and she is beside herself." And I promised her I would call you. He chuckled and he said, I'll get a truck and a trailer and I'll go get the pigs. You can tell your wife that the pigs are safe. I'm not sure if he was laughing at me or laughing at her or just laughing at himself for getting up on his Sunday morning and going to do a rescue operation on pigs that in 2 or 3 weeks would be bacon. I'm not sure that we saved the pigs. The guy was raising them to take to market. But wouldn't it be nice if we had that kind of care and concern and compassion about people? And yes, my wife does have that care and concern and compassion for people. When we were kids, just married, I was 21, she was 18. We lived in Salem, Arkansas. Just down from our house, we lived in the church-owned house, the parsonage. You could go down to the little four-way stop, and there was a service station combination videotape rental and small restaurant called the White Oak Station. And in those days, you could choose. We could have the money to rent a video or we could have the money to buy a pizza, but we did not have the money for both. And we were sitting in the White Oak Station eating our pizza. And I'm not sure if there was an impending storm or if it was going to be like 4 degrees or something, but we're sitting in this little restaurant, which was our weekend treat. It was date night as much as you could date night working at the Salem Church of Christ on the salary that they paid us. But we're sitting there, and tucked into a corner was a young man in a motorcycle outfit. The thick, padded, full-body jumpsuit with a scarf around his neck and the big, full-faced helmet sitting on the table, and you could tell he'd been on the road a long, long time. And from the look in his eye, he was going to be on the road a long, long time. And Jackie said, you need to go talk to him. I said, honey, he looks pretty intimidating. I'm not sure I need to go talk to him. He doesn't look like he wants to be bothered. You need to go talk to him because if he gets back on that motorcycle tonight, he's going to die. I said, baby, he's a grown man. He has a motorcycle. He'll be you need to go talk to him. And as I said, I do speak Jackie-nese, and I learned it early. So I got up and walked over and introduced myself to the young man. And he said, yeah, he was riding and had a long way to go. And I asked him, was he aware of the weather? And I don't remember now if it was an impending storm or the temperatures were dropping. And he said he knew he was riding into the teeth of the thing, but he had to keep riding because he didn't have the money to stay anywhere. I said, we live in this little house on top of the hill there by the church building. We've got extra bedrooms and a basement. Would you please spend the night with us? And he looked as if someone had slapped him or that I'd grown an extra head. But he accepted our invitation. And for several years, he wrote us at Christmas and on our birthdays. And we would get random notes and pictures from him from various places. And he would tell us repeatedly that we saved his life. We attempted to save his soul, and in our correspondences with him, we mentioned salvation, but he was just thankful that we'd let him stay in our home one night, and he had not driven his motorcycle, as weary as he was, into the storm. My wife came home one day from school. This is 30 years later, and hey, there's a young man in my class, and he said he's going to have to move to Ohio when his mom joins the Army. We can't let him move to Ohio. If he moves to Ohio with someone he doesn't know or a cousin he's never met, he'll be in trouble. We need to see if we can keep him for the summer. This is a young man I've never met. Young person I don't know. But we ended up making some overtures and ended up not only with the young man, but with his 7-year-old brother, and they spent a summer with us. It was an enjoyable, frustrating, and trying summer. 2 young men of a different ethnicity living in our home in Gurley, Alabama, and attending our church. And we took him to football practice, and I repeatedly would be involved as a parent or a guardian with the school, with both the boys, the young man in high school and the little boy in grammar school. I'm not sure what impact living in our house had on those boys that summer. I know that often the older one will call me on Father's Day. You never know what impact those kinds of things will have. That concern that somebody's getting their feet wet and you can do something about it. I don't know the long-term effects that the motorcycle rider would experience from our invitation to stay in our humble home in Salem, Arkansas. It's funny that things that seem very easy for us to do, small gestures, something as simple as calling a young man and saying, "Hey, my wife's worried about your pigs drowning." I'm not sure what those innocuous moments do, and I'm not sure how the echoes play out in people's lives. I take that back. I do know there's a lady that lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and apparently she and her husband are wealthy. They had some children, but never had boys. And being good Christian people, had hoped and wished that one day they would have a boy, a son, that might grow up to be a gospel preacher. That did not happen. So, in their golden years, with the bounty of their wealth, they established a scholarship called the Baker Scholarship. I drove to Harding University in the spring in the late summer of 1981. I was 8 hours away from home. I was driving a Chevrolet Impala that cost $250. I had $50 cash in my pocket. I crossed my acceptance papers in the mail and showed up at Harding University on the advice of my brother and Faith. There was no employment in Searcy, Arkansas. I couldn't even get a job at a Walmart distribution center. And I was struggling to stay in school. I had done some calculations and realized that there was a deadline that if things didn't change, I would have to tuck my tail and go back home. I would have just enough money to put enough fuel in a 68 Impala I had named West Wind and go home. There was a group of guys on campus who were ministry students. We would call them Bible majors. And all the Bible majors were required to be in a club called the Timothy Club. The Timothy Club wasn't my thing. Some of these guys were your typical preaching students, had a large nerd factor hanging on with them, and I just wasn't really interested in being around some of those guys, and I often didn't go to the Timothy Club meeting. I got a note in the campus mail that Dr. Jerry Jones, the head of the Bible department at Harding University, wanted to meet with me in his office. We referred to the downstairs portion of the old Bible building as the Holy of Holies. I went down to the Bible building and met with Dr. Jones, expecting to be told that I had been noticed that I had not been at the Timothy Club meetings. What Dr. Jones informed me of was that there was a scholarship called the Baker Scholarship, and that it was often awarded to a Bible major, and that my name had appeared on the list. And he said, oddly enough, we are the selection committee, and we put the names down of the boys who are going to receive this scholarship, and your name's on the list, and nobody knows who you are, son. And so we had a conversation about me being a youth minister since my junior year in high school, and that I had chosen to come to Harding because my brother had encouraged me to seek a more powerful academic degree, because in the future the church was going to have more doctors and lawyers in it, and the local minister was not going to be the smartest guy in the room, and our academics needed to be better than just a proof text and a smile. And so I'd come out to Harding University expecting to get their better, quote unquote, better education. And I was here. He thanked me for my time and said, by the way, this scholarship has never been awarded to a freshman. And I went back to my routine. The weeks went by, and the mark on the calendar said that on this Thursday, I would go through the process of withdrawing from my classes, packing my Impala, and going back to Oxford, Alabama. The Wednesday before the Thursday came, I got a note in the campus mail to go meet with Dr. Jones again. I had missed another Timothy Club meeting. And walking into Dr. Jones's office, he said, we just couldn't get our minds around the fact that nobody knew who you were, but your name appeared on this list. And we've awarded you the Baker Scholarship. The only thing you have to do is here's an address. And about once a month, you just write a report, some kind of a progress to let the people who've given you this money know what's going on in your life. 830 Battery Lane, Nashville, Tennessee. I would take a piece of my sketch pad, the big sketch pad, and I would lay it on top of my drawing table and turn the light on under it. And then I would use lines so that I could draw and write these perfect sentences with no lines on the paper. And then I would seal the paper in an envelope and mail it to 830 Battery Lane. And I would talk about my adventures and write about my girlfriends and say the things that I had been doing and my progress in my classes. And once a month, I wrote that letter. Dr. Jones informed me that the scholarship was quite possibly going to follow me my entire academic career. The sum total of the scholarship ended up being about half of my college tuition, without which I would not have a Bible degree from Harding University. I would not be a minister or a counselor or a chaplain or be married to Jackie or live in Huntsville, Alabama. I was driving to Indianapolis on I-65 from Alexander City the summer before I married Jackie. And I turned off to stop and get refreshment and maybe put some gas in my 68 Chevrolet Impala. And I noticed that Harding Place ran into Battery Lane in Nashville. And I drove that old car around until I found on a mailbox a very nondescript little brick house, 830 Battery Lane. I walked up to the door and I rang the doorbell, and the diminutive little lady opened the door. And I said, ma'am, you don't know me. And she smiled and said, oh, you must be one of the boys. One of the boys. I don't know how many of us there are. I don't know how many boys she sent to school before me, and I don't know how many boys she sent to school after me. But I do know one thing. The amount of money she gave me was inconsequential to her. But it meant everything to me. She did something for me I could not do for myself. She put me on a path that would alter every single moment for the rest of my life. And she did it almost indirectly. She'd established the scholarship fund, and this group at Harding had awarded it to me, and I don't know to this day how my name got on the list to be considered. But something so minor to her put me on a path that would not have existed without her and her generosity. She brought me into her home, and she had hand painted a peacock on one of the walls. She baked homemade chocolate chip cookies, and we drank chocolate milk together. I had been sending little drawings on my sketch pad when I would write her letters, little cartoons in the margins, and I realized I was actually sending cartoons to an artist. Her paintings made my drawings look like cave paintings. And we sat maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I don't know that she's ever heard a sermon. This was before everything was on the internet and YouTube and Facebook. And so I'm not sure she ever even heard me preach. She didn't care. She wanted me to be a preacher. She gave me a small gift that day, an album by Batsell Barrett Baxter on love. It's a sermon he did. I kept it for a long, long, long time until I no longer had a record player. I hugged her neck. I got in my Chevrolet and I drove to Indianapolis, Indiana, and did a gospel meeting at the age of 21. I can't tell you what it means to have somebody do something for you that you can't do for yourself. And yet the thing that she did for me was probably in her eyes so small. And I wasn't the only person, and I wasn't a special person, and I'm not I didn't deserve what she did for me. I had no reason to be awarded that scholarship. And yet that little simple gesture from this little old lady in Nashville, Tennessee, absolutely impacted my life. You don't know what your kindness, your assistance, your encouragement, your benevolence, you don't even know what your concern will mean in the life of someone else. I guess if we could plot it out and see that A plus B equals C, it would frighten us to the point that we would be afraid to do or be afraid not to do. But we really don't get to see the end results of most of it. I don't know if my life has an impact. I call it significant obscurity. It's the idea that I just need to make my little world better. I need to contribute to my community. I need to contribute to my city. I need to encourage my circle. It's really not about changing the world. It's just about changing my world. And yet I have the ability, I have the opportunity to do anything that I do. Because a little old lady, a tiny little lady in Nashville, Tennessee, decided to care for a pig that didn't even belong to her. There are 32 miles of cave passages in Cumberland Cavern. 333 feet underground is the Volcano Room. The Volcano Room is the site for the youth rally known as Erupt. It's an underground youth rally. It's an annual event. It takes place in October. The next Erupt is scheduled for October of 2021. Erupt is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. If you'd like more information, you may contact them at eruptyouth.rally@gmail.com. That's eruptyouthRally@gmail.com, or check out their website for more information, 3 W's and a dot, eruptyouthRally.com, www.eruptyouthRally.com.